You are listening to the B2B Marketing Mindset with Pete Monfre and Bill Lowell. We want to help demystify marketing to reduce risk, drive more and better opportunities, and grow your business. Are you ready to master marketing?
Are you ready? Are you ready to master marketing? This is Pete Monfre, the B2B Marketing Mindset. Hey, listen, welcome to episode 105. 105 episodes. Our guest today is the head of public relations for the Milwaukee-based agency Nelson Schmidt, and she has spent her entire life, or her adult life, maybe not as a baby, I don't know, maybe, but honing her craft. And today we'll be sharing some of the most important tips to get so-called free press for your business or your agency. But I want to ask you a favor. If you're seeing this video live, do us a big favor, hit like, comment, or share. LinkedIn's algorithm, you might not know this, here's some good knowledge for you. When you first start broadcasting, they only release it to a handful of your followers. And so based on if you get some likes, if you get some shares, some comments, then they will open it up to a larger group of people. So it really helps us out if you do those things. You don't have to say anything. You're just going to hit that like button. It's so super easy. And really quickly here, I want to make sure I mention the B2B Marketing Mindset is brought to you by the Agency Founders Network, an invitation-only new platform for early-stage marketing services companies. So it's really fun to have agency people on to teach us more on how to be a better agency. So you can sign up for that and check it out. We're going to be launching that in September, so really proud of that. All right. And so let's introduce our co-host, Mr. Bill Lowell. Welcome, Bill, broadcasting from a cheese factory deep behind the cheddar curtain, right? Founder of Business Development Directives marketing research firm. You can find that at bddonline.com. Oh, so many plugs. Welcome, Mr. Bill.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's excited to be here, and I'm really excited about our guest today. That's going to be great, and anybody that's listening, I think they're going to learn a lot from Shelley. That's
sure. And our shot
and by
is
the way,
all
speaking
up.
of cheese, what's that?
Go ahead, I'll fix it. Right, live right here. We're fixing the shot.
Okay,
there you go.
Speaking of cheese factories, I did. I'm not broadcasting for one, but the town that I grew up in had a big cheese factory. It was kind of fun.
So people think I'm just making fun of you, but cheese is so important. Like, people don't realize the importance of cheese, and so it's just, I don't know. Thank you for enlightening us on the cheese.
Well, anyhow, regardless, I'm glad to be here. So thank you.
We're glad to have you as always. So I want to welcome, thanks, and thank you for bringing Shelley. By the way, this is such a misunderstood topic. And not just by clients, but even in our own industry. I think agencies don't leverage PR. And I mean, do you guys kind of see it that way?
Oh, absolutely. I'm assuming you can see my head now, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I think we can, and you look great.
Thank you.
Well, so Shelley's...
Yes.
Go ahead. Let me introduce you real quick. So, friend of the program, absolutely. I'm a former PR hack. I had to quit because it just drove me nuts. But she's the real deal. And so, tell us a little bit about your role at Nelson Schmidt. Great agency. I actually think back in the 90s when you were with Belter and Lincoln, right? Mm-hmm. I think we were competitors. So, and I think you guys were right down the street from us. Tell me what excites you about PR. What's kept you really coming back to it over and over in your career?
I think it goes back to the story, and people don't capitalize on that. The story behind the story. And I don't want to give away too many of our talking points, but I love to draw people in by the things that they might not think about in a brand, and just unique ways of captivating audiences. I was a journalism major, so it's always been about, the written word and how you can really engage people with just the right messaging.
And one of the things, just to add to Shelley's credibility too, one of the things, Pete, that I wanted our audience to know is that she came and gave 2 guest lectures to UW Whitewater, actually the capstone public relations class. So it was a real honor to have her there, and she did a fabulous job. She did it actually 2 semesters in a row for me just this year. So
fantastic. Well, maybe I'll learn something from this.
Oh, you will.
Potentially. I hope so.
I hope so too. I learn more than the audience. I learn more than anybody. Sometimes Bill and I are the experts, but most of the time we're the students. So, um, you know, so publicity, PR, like so many things in the marketing world, these words are flogged. I mean, they're just misused. They've become like nobody
Mhm.
knows what this stuff means. So a lot of times when I'm talking about it, I'm really talking about publicity. And I know that when clients uh, ask about it, what they really want is they want to see their company in the press. Now, PR definitely can extend farther than that. We'll get into a little bit of that, but it doesn't really work the way people think. Is that a
100%. And I am consistently educating clients because they're like, we need to get a press release out. PR, that's like that much of PR. A press release I like to use as top of mind awareness. Reporters get hundreds of press releases a day. So in order to cut through the clutter, it can't be about that press release unless you've got such an amazing story. I always say media relations, what you're supposed to do is the second part of that, relations. So in order for my press release to cut through the clutter, the reporter needs to know who I am. I need to build that relationship well in advance of that press release, or my press release is going to quickly be sent to the little garbage can icon in their inbox. So I tell clients that all the time. Like, we can do that, but that's not going to get you the results you think you want to get.
Yeah, and to that point, this is something I see all the time. They will write a press release, and what will they do with it? They will put it on their blog.
Yep.
Okay? No one will see your press release. But the good news is usually that press release is about something that no one else cares about but them. Hey, it was the CEO's birthday and we had nice cake with mint frosting. You know, nobody cares.
Mhm.
There are distribution systems. They are super powerful, but I love this topic because we've been very successful in getting publicity, and we do it ourselves, which is kind of a bit of a trick. It's kind of hard to do publicity for yourself, but I think it's because we know how that system works. Um, but I really want to jump in. Bill, any thoughts before we jump in?
Well, and I'm sure Shelley's going to get to that, but the one thing that I think the audience needs to know, just like you said, it's not a press release. There's so much more to public relations, and Shelley
Mhm.
talked about the relations, it's building even relationships with your audiences and with your target audiences. I mean, so there's so much more, but I don't want to get into too much here, but I know we're going to come up to it on a few points, but it is so much more than just getting that quick media attention. There's so much more to it, and I'm kind of excited for Shelley to share some of that with us. But like you said about the messaging, Shelley, we've done some research. I mean, what is it? The average person is getting hit with over 3,000 marketing messages a day. So
Yep.
like, you better do something to tell that story like you're talking about. So I think that's
Yes. I always tell my clients to think of the story behind the story.
hmm
Um, what's right in front of them is interesting to them. What their target audience wants to know is something that sets them apart. Why should your brand be important to me? And especially with younger generations. I mean, Gen Z, millennials, they want to get behind organizations that mean something. So that's not just I sell this great widget, but I sell this great widget that impacts this. So I'm always looking for that. What is the story behind the story? I worked at a nonprofit at one point, and they're like, "We got to get our services out. We got to get our services out." I'm like, "That's great. Let's get your services out. Can I tour your facilities?" So I walk through their facilities, step into one of the facilities, and the main contact is blind. And I'm like, "That's your story right there. Like, you have a blind person who knows everybody's voice, who can tell by their footsteps who they are, who is leading your organization." They're like, "Oh, we thought it was our services." I'm like, "Well, yeah, but the blind person is your story. That's what's going to captivate people and show how you're unique." as opposed to, the organization down the street that I could utilize similar services for.
Exactly. And we could do a whole episode about this idea that, well, our work speaks for itself. All we have to do is tell people that we clean differentials, whatever it is. I mean, yeah, no. So that's just that's an extremely good point. But let's jump into our points here. The first one, Shelley can lead us off here. But PR is not an afterthought.
Yeah, and that I think is something that PR professionals across the globe will tell you, it's all about the advertising. It's all about the splash. It's all about the pretty pictures. It's all about what publications I'm in, where, the digital ads that are running, all of that. And that's all great. But a lot of times what organizations don't realize is your consumer is really smart and they know that you bought that space. So while that's great and that, brings people to mind and gives you that top of mind awareness and talks about your products and services, that's not the piece that adds the credibility to your organization. It's when the media says, oh my gosh, this is a really valuable message, and we want to feature you in an editorial piece that is, we call it earned media for a reason. You have earned that piece of editorial landscape real estate, because your message is so important. What you have to offer is so important. So the marketing is important. And I say that coming from a marketing background before I really delved more deeply into PR. I love marketing, love putting together brand messages, all of those things. But the PR is what's really going to get people to understand the value of your product.
Well, and you mentioned, I think, a key part of it is credibility. So this is what
Pete, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, you're having a hard time hearing me. That should be better there. The guys here are on top of things, you know that? But when I tell people this, that if you run an ad, for example, the audience kind of inherently knows that you're the one behind the ad. You're the one saying these things about yourself. Ads can be effective, but getting an article in even a trade publication, like everybody thinks, oh, would it be the Wall Street Journal? Well, slow down there, cowboy. In fact, do you really want to be in the Wall Street Journal? Is that where your prospects are? Is that where your customers are? Maybe not, right? They're probably certainly at the Builders Association, who's, by the way, dying for content. And you can get that publicity, but it appears to be a third-party endorsement.
Yep.
That is so much more powerful, right?
Yeah.
But to the point, it can't be an afterthought. It has to be planned. Let's throw it over to Bill. He's dying to say something.
No, I am really not. I'm good. I do think that the planned approach is critical. I mean, isn't it, Shelley, isn't that something that you probably take all of your clients through, even from a perspective of like what issues are coming up or what kinds of things are you dealing with? I mean, you are going to be proactive, and companies that are going to be proactive are going to be 10 times ahead of the curve versus the ones that use it for the reactive, where it's like, okay, we're reacting to this crisis. But so I think part of that planned approach is critical, not only from the integrated marketing communication standpoint, but even just for issues that are going to arise. I think,
100%. Yeah.
So you need to be
You are
thinking about that.
100%. There is time that PR is reactionary. It has to be, because we're also in that frame of protecting reputations and things of that nature.
Right.
But whenever possible, creating a planned approach to what are the messages you have, what's going to resonate, what are you hearing from your customers, what do they want to know, and then putting it out there. And I'll get into a little bit more about, it works from the other side of the spectrum too, understanding what the publications want. And that's, part of the planning on my end, where I will go back to my client and say, okay, well, this pub is really looking for content about this. Your customer wants to hear that. You've got a subject matter expert. Let's put this together. So it's really putting all of the pieces together so that you're feeding the media what they want to hear. You're feeding the customer interesting pieces that set you apart, and you're representing the brand messaging of your customer appropriately,
I mean,
or of your client.
it's a huge balancing act, and the other
Mm-hmm.
thing I want people to understand, clients to understand, ultimately it's the editor who's going to decide what runs, what story it is. You
Mm-hmm.
might pitch them some story, they might completely change it. You gotta,
Yeah.
that's where the talent comes in, where it's like, okay, but you still need to make it fit the strategy of the client. I mean, there is some real nuance to this, and that's why I think it's such a great topic.
But if I could just say one more thing about not being an afterthought, even just what Shelley talked about earlier with regard to like what's the story, what's the message? I mean, all of that needs to be done pre any of that stuff, just so
Mm-hmm.
that you come across, right, Shelley? You come across like
Yes.
you've already thought of this stuff, and then you are able to reach the right mediums with what those people need and want. And it's like it's when people don't do that, I think they get themselves into some trouble, you know?
And Pete, you also had an interesting, made me think of making sure that your story is buttoned up, so that I'm not saying that you um in any way feed the editor, but you make sure that what you're telling them is the story you want them to tell, so that when it comes out, it is aligns with the messaging you want. So it is really important as PR professionals that then we're developing the talking points for our client. We're training our client on what they should and shouldn't be saying when they are talking to the media, to make sure that story does align as closely with their brand messaging, and it doesn't come out with, well, that wasn't what we said.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Next point, PR is more than a press release. More than a
Yes, I
press
gave that
release, is
away
it
at the
not?
top.
You did. You did not bury the lead,
I'm sorry.
but go ahead.
Yes, and again, I hear this all the time. I want to get out a press release. Let's put a press release out on that. Part of my job as a PR practitioner is, okay, we can do that. Obviously the client is, if that's what they want, great. Under helping them to understand what this is actually going to get them. But then, I always tell them my job is the relations part of media relations. So I typically, anytime I have a new client or a new publication, I always call them no agenda, talk to the reporter, talk to the editor. I just want to get to know you. That is the key to getting your material published, the relationship part of working with the media. So I want to know, what are the things your readers want to hear about? What are things you're having difficulty getting experts to talk about? Where are areas we can support you in making sure, to your point, you get the content? Because publications now are starving for things to put out there, because content is king. And so they are under so much pressure to continually be putting out new and interesting and unique things. So I always start at the desk side, or in this case of modern technology, a video interview with them, just to find out what they need, get to know them, no agenda. That way, if I do have to send out a press release or I'm pitching them on something, they already know who I am. So I already cut through the clutter. But so much more, that relationship is the most important part.
So, you know, I have a question about that. So these editors will take time out of their day just to have a
Mhm.
casual conversation with you. Is it because, look, what's better than produced content? Free content from their standpoint. So I
Mhm.
guess, is that why they're willing to invest that time with you? One, they know you're a professional. Like, they know you're
Yeah.
not some Yahoo that's trying to promote their filter business. Um, that potentially you're going to bring them some real value.
Yeah. And I would say not every editor is willing to take time out of their day. It's all in how you present it. I always like to just send an introductory, I want to introduce myself. This is what I do. These are the clients I represent. Would love to get 10 to 15 minutes that we can just have a quick chat so I can learn a little bit more. I've already read your publication, so I enjoy the article you wrote on da 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 da. so I can then show that I'm not making you do my job for me, but I really want to start to establish a relationship with you. And I can say that that approach, all the editors that I actually get face to face with, or the reporters, are so excited to sit down for, and typically it's not 15 minutes. I'm like, okay, we've been talking for 45 minutes now. You got a story you got to write, or
But you said something, Shelley, that I think is so important. And you're also bringing, besides that relationship, you're bringing them value. You just mentioned these are my 6 or 8 clients that I'm working with. I mean, think about what you're just doing for that editor or those publications or whatever. I mean, you're bringing them, like Pete said, the content, but you've got a whole diverse range of other clients. So it's not just a one and done, which speaks to the audience. Like, so if you're trying to do it yourself, you're just one up against everybody. But if you're with
Mhm.
an agency like you are, at least you bring some of that clout and that power to be able to really give them a lot of different choices. So, I mean, I think that's
Yes,
really a benefit.
Well,
yes, 100%.
and I think I can speak to that. I mean, editors get calls from lunatics all day long.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they're very wary of that. So this is one thing, if you're going to do your own PR, be aware of the risk of this, because you send something stupid to an editor one time, that editor will never open your messages again. All right?
Mhm.
So there is a tradition, there is a process, there is things are formatted, they're written in a certain style. I mean, what an editor wants, and what I've found, they want to be able to copy and paste that right into their magazine or into their newspaper or whatever it is. It has to be written in a way that they can use it. That is, if they want you to write the story. Sometimes they decide to write the story, but
Mhm.
that press release is the start. It's like, this is where you pull the idea together. But then there's another piece that's totally different, and that would be the pitch and how you communicate that. You don't just send a press release to editors. Uh, there's more pieces to that puzzle. And you mentioned, like, video packages. Editors love video packages
Mhm.
and imagery, right?
Yes, and the more you can provide them up front and making their job easy, so they don't have to, find the stock imagery that might not actually even represent what you're trying to get across appropriately, the easier it is. We're finding local media, they're running on a shoestring. So they don't have the photographers to go out and take the pictures that will accompany your story. Same thing with trade publications. It's um, a small staff that they're working with, and they're a lot of times using freelancers and things of that nature. And especially with trades where they might be located in upstate New York, and my client is in Iowa. Well, they're not going to send someone to Iowa to take pictures. So I need to provide them with the content, video, imagery that represents the story that we're trying to tell.
If one of the things that I just wanted to mention too, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shelley or Pete, but like you'd mentioned that Pete, if you're doing this on your own and you send one thing out and it's bad or wrong, you're never going to have them pick up. Another caveat that I would see is, Shelley's available. And so, I mean, so if an editor or somebody needs to get a hold, they're going to contact her and she's going to make herself available to
Mm-hmm.
get that response. If you're a business owner or if you're somebody else in an organization and you're sending out stuff, you might be on a call, and somebody's calling you, they want to get a quote or they want to do something and you're not available. I think you're done then too. I don't think they're ever going to go back to you. So at least that's my
Yep.
opinion.
Yes, and that also can be a difficulty, because one of the great things we love to do is get our clients on as the subject matter expert,
Mhm.
because it creates that, again, credibility of they know what they're talking about. But we always tell the client, if in fact I'm going to be pitching you for this story angle that you then are going to be the person that they need to interview, you have to actually be available for them. And so that is a fine line you walk, because they're busy people, but also in just educating them on the mileage they're going to get out of them getting a quote in a national trade publication that's picked up by all of their target audience.
Well, it's absolutely worth it to drop everything. And by the way, you will be on the editor's time. And what they want it, and they might want it in 2 hours from now, right? I mean, it's pointless to try to fight it, right? I mean, it's like, this is how it works in the newsroom. And if you want press, then these are the things that you need to do. So let me do a little quick thing. I want to let the people know that if you're seeing this, or if you're just listening to this out there in podcast land, it's available everywhere fine podcasts are consumed. You are not getting the whole picture. You can go to b2bmarketingmindset.com. You see that on your screen right there. And that's where you can see the rest of it. There's over 100 episodes. There is a lot more information. You can subscribe there. You can subscribe on Spotify, or most of our subscribers are on Apple Podcasts, but iHeartRadio goes on and on. But if you want to get the whole story, b2bmarketingmindset.com, check that out. So be a little bit of business there. Let's go to the next point. Beyond the brand story. So PR, public relations, publicity, has to consider, and you kind of touched on this earlier, the story adjacent to the brand story. Because isn't the brand story kind of all about you? Is that really where the issue is?
Well, I think it's twofold. The brand story, unless you are an incredibly unique organization, you typically have competitors. So what you're putting out there that's about you and the products and services you offer, potentially your competition can say the same thing. And you can say, well, we've got this thing that's better, but it's a similar story that's going to be put out there. So it really is looking for, again, I call them, what's the adjacent story? Is there somebody on your staff that does something unique that we can get you out there? But it's different than what your competition might be putting out there. You know, I always go back to like Tom's, the shoe manufacturer. You know, their story behind the story is the nonprofit donations that go along with purchasing their shoes. So that's cool PR because there's a lot of shoe manufacturers, but Tom's does this. And so that also, to our earlier point, you need to have a little bit of planning on what the story beyond the story is. But those are the things that set you apart in the media. I mean, editors and reporters eat that up too, because they're, especially in the trade pubs, they're writing the same thing over and over and trying to find unique angles to tell that story. So you need to give them something that's far more compelling than what your competition would be letting them know about.
Yeah, and it isn't all about you. Go ahead, Bill.
No, I'm good. I really like that story behind the story because that can lead to so many more things too, right, Shelley? Like, you know, it just opens up kind of your client's world to them to learn more about them, but maybe have future stories that could be written or developed, right? I mean, I'm sure that happens to you, doesn't it? All of a sudden you develop a story behind the story and they go, oh, that's so interesting. We're going to do that later, or let's, they'll come back to you.
Yes, and it will give you additional pieces to the way the story builds throughout their press cycle. The other thing, I don't know, wait, thought's gone. Never mind. Go ahead, Pete. It'll come back. Keep going.
Well, there's nothing more boring than talking about your business and your services and your blah, 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 and you. So somehow you have to translate that and get that. There's really a triangle here. It has to appeal to the editor. It has to work for the client. It has to work for the editor's audience. To me, that's really the biggest challenge, is how do you thread that needle consistently? And because you want to be known by the editors as somebody who can bring a story and make it work, right? And showing that you know their publication, and you need to really do know their publication. Another thing I just want to throw out there is, well, this maybe is to the next point, but there's editorial schedules, right? They know what they're going to publish sometimes a year in advance. So if you're in a hurry, you could be disappointed maybe a little bit right there.
Can I throw out a marketing question that maybe
Please
somebody
do.
in the audience might be having? So Shelley, help me out, and Pete, if you want to jump in, this would be great. So when you're first meeting with a client, and let's say that your brand people are coming, is it a team approach that everybody's trying to create that story and find out the story behind the story, or is that the PR's role, or is that like the brand people do it and then the public relations now they're trying to come up with a different angle, or they're using that and then kind of extending it? I'm just curious for our audience if you could maybe just try to explain that, just so people can understand how it works. If you understand my question, maybe
Oh,
I'm
100. Yeah, I think you want to be integrated. So the most important thing is, what is our messaging? And that goes across all of the platforms. That, what is our brand messaging, which aligns with what is our sales and marketing messaging, which aligns with what is the messaging that we're putting out there in our earned media. So no, it is 100% back to the beginning, a planned approach of what do we want people to know, and then there can be adjacencies to the messaging that are unique to PR, but it always needs to line back up with what is, we call it, what's the promise to the customer, what do we want the customer to know, and then how does all of this messaging align with that promise.
Well, what kind of amazes me is in the agency world, we tend to ignore doing our own publicity, like leveraging publicity for our own businesses. And we're in the best position to do that because we have the relationships, we understand how to spin the story, but for some reason we just don't. And I don't know, maybe it's the old shoeless cobbler thing, but I hope that
kids.
if you're running a marketing business out there, you're paying attention, because this works. It works for your clients and it works for you. Let's get to our next point. This is so important. Don't wait for a crisis. Don't wait for a crisis.
100%.
What do you mean by? I mean, it seems obvious. I'm like, what do you mean by that? It seems kind of obvious, but there's more to it.
I think that, I don't think that, I know that there are a lot of organizations who they theoretically understand the value of a crisis plan, but it's an afterthought because nobody thinks it's going to happen to them. And unfortunately, how you handle the crisis speaks a lot to who you are as an organization, and in some cases can make or break who you are as an organization. So you should have a media statement ready within 15 minutes of a crisis happening. They should hear from somebody. You should have your entire team understanding what their roles are within the crisis. They should already have talking points. If there's a fire, this is what we're going to say. If there's a fatality, this is what we're going to say. Obviously, there will be things that will be added given the specificity of whatever the crisis is. But I have so many clients who, well, we kind of have a crisis plan, but it's not a big deal. Well, it becomes a big deal when there's a crisis. The other thing that I find is, oh yeah, we have a crisis plan. We developed it 10 years ago. Okay. So I think that some of those things might have changed. Technology is creating crises that we could have never thought about 10 years ago. So this to me is one of those, well, maybe if we have the budget, we'll put that in the plan. This should be one of the first things that you make sure you do, and you refresh it regularly. And the other thing we always like to say is, okay, we've got this plan now, so do you know how to use it? And because we have regularly gone to organizations and trained them on how to use their crisis plan, so that everybody is prepared. It's kind of like medical training or EMT training or whatever. It's just like, this is how I react when this happens. So such an important part of public relations that's often overlooked because people are thinking it's just a press release.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like that muscle memory is like so critical, like you were talking about, Shelley, because in a crisis, that's like the worst time. I mean, to try to think rational at that point, it's like, that's going to be actually scary. And I don't know about you, Shelley, but I'm going to pick on the lawyers for just a second. So I have had it where I've had clients, and we're research oriented, but where clients, they might have a crisis, and the first thing they do is they go to their attorney to decide what they can and cannot say. And I'm like, oh my, I mean, I love attorneys and they have their purpose, but sometimes the attorneys are saying don't say anything. And it's like, maybe you need to get out in front on this and actually
Mhm.
give some info. But I think to your point, the crisis management is absolutely critical, and it's good to have, and you hope you never have to use it, but if you do, at least you're there, it's ready. And I love the idea that you do some training with regard to that too, because it's
And
like
I think, I mean, we see this play out time and time again. And, one of the examples I had was a couple winters ago, right before Christmas, when we had the big snowstorm that shut down airline traffic. And Southwest Airlines had some issues with their scheduling system that, as we found out later, was a very antiquated system and hadn't been updated. But their response to that was so slow. And, it wasn't that 15 minutes that the media's calling us and we got to tell them what's going on. And we got people who want to get home to see grandma and they can't, and they're going to spend Christmas Eve, at O'Hare. And those types of things, I think Southwest is probably still feeling the ramifications. I don't know if they have a crisis plan. I don't exactly know what went on behind the scenes, but, those pivotal moments in an organization, again, they can make or break. And I think organizations, if they have handled it well to at the front end, the crisis stinks, but they get through it. If they haven't, they're still digging out. And I think I actually saw some media today that on Southwest and how they're changing their open seating policy.
right.
Some of that could be because of financial things that they're facing now because of decisions that were made. I don't know that to be fact, but
Well, it kind of makes sense. The thing that I think of that's so immediate in my mind is Ascension. Ascension Healthcare was hit with ransomware, and it took them months. First, they hardly would say anything about it, but they lost access to their entire customer database, your health records. It also put your personal information out into the world. It affected, I think, 18 states. It was an absolute disaster. Now, they had just outsourced their IT to India right before that. They were hit by a ransomware attack in February, so they had already been through this once. They didn't learn a thing. United Health paid $23 million in Bitcoin in 2023, I believe, October, ransomware attack. And what I try to tell people is this: don't think it's not going to happen to you. It can even happen to a one-person business, a two-person business. You got a website that's 10 years old. It's almost inevitable. You're going to wake up one day and you're going to have a big problem. Okay,
Yeah.
So, but in the result, I guess I'm going off on a tangent there, but Ascension Healthcare, it was their fault. They deserve everything they get. And it looks like now they're actually leaving the market in a number of states. I know here in Texas, I'll need to find another insurer next year. And so I can't stress this enough. I mean, this will put you out of business. And so,
Yeah, I mean, and that is really true. And the other thing too is, like, from a public relations standpoint, I think there are so many organizations or business to businesses that don't understand how great it is to have a PR firm help them. For example, like Shelley, you were talking about like all of the different stories and kind of coming up with all the different ways.
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing with a crisis, Pete, where it's like, okay, we just mentioned cyber attacks and we mentioned fire, but it's like, I am sure that Shelley and her firm, Nelson Schmidt, probably have a list of 25 things that could go wrong that they could help prepare. But like, who even thinks about that until this happens? And so,
well, and Bill, to your point, in a comprehensive crisis plan, you think about every potential scenario at this point, so that and that is all outlined as to what should and shouldn't be said. What is the organization's stance on this, and how does it align with their brand? I mean, there's brand is woven through all of this too. I mean, that speaks to who you are as an organization inherently.
And if it sounds like a lot of work, that's why we have people that do this and have the systems and they're efficient. I don't mean to shill for the agency, but I think this is really hard to bite off yourself.
Yep.
And so it's just something that I wanted to throw out there because there are a lot of things that you can do yourself, but I don't think PR is really one that's well suited for that. I don't think research is actually well suited for that either because of all of our inherent bias. But that's for another episode. So PR is just a small part of a comprehensive content plan.
Yes. And when I tell people who are not aware of what I do for a living or just think of public relations as a press release, that's all they like, what do you do the rest of your day after you write those few releases? And I'm like, well, I oversee an entire content team. So, blogs are part of your PR. That is your owned messaging, and it's you able to create and craft the story you want to tell. Your social platforms are part of your owned public relations, and how you create those organic messages and put those types of things out into the universe is all part of your PR program. So, there's case studies, your white papers, all of those things should be part of a comprehensive public relations program, which, oh, by the way, includes media relations and a few press releases if you really need us to do that. So, and people don't really think about all of the spaces that public relations touches in their organization.
No, absolutely. This I think is just a fantastic topic, and we're almost out of time. So what I'd like to do is go to our final thoughts. So everybody just stand by, and I think, why don't we start with our guest with our final thoughts, but stand by for just a second. And so, what are your final thoughts on this, Shelley? Let's just start with Shelley. We'll go to Bill, and then we'll wrap this up.
I think going back to where we started is that PR cannot be an afterthought. It can't be an add-on if you've got an extra $50,000 in your marketing budget. It has to be part of an integrated plan because, that allows you to create the credibility behind your brand in every aspect of, what's being put out on your social media. Is there uniformity to that? If I were to share this post on my feed, would people know it was you? And that's all part of your PR plan. So I can't preach that enough, that it absolutely cannot be an afterthought. It has to be an upfront, okay, and what are we doing with PR as well?
Awesome. Bill, final thoughts.
I've really enjoyed this and I've learned a lot, but I think it also, the importance of the extension of what PR covers is so important. I mean, if somebody is doing an event, there's PR that surrounds that.
100%.
Contest. I mean, a trade show. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And I go, oh my God, this is overwhelming. How do But there's so much that you guys that PR could help with that. That I just think it's absolutely critical. And so, I mean, even just signage. I mean, how you use some of that, I think, is really really an important thing. So those are my final thoughts. And I'd like, if I could, to use my last 30 seconds. Shelley, how do we get a hold of you, or if somebody wants to contact you or whatever? I mean, do we have any way to contact you before Pete gives his final thoughts?
Absolutely. It is my name, my first initial and my last name at n-s.com. So S Schumacher at n-s.com.
Awesome. And, find her on LinkedIn. Shelley seems to be everywhere.
Oh, 100%. I'm on LinkedIn, yes. We're all on LinkedIn.
But thanks for thinking of that, Bill. I get carried away with all my button pushing over here. My final thoughts on this is, we're saying, look, you have to do it this way. You have to do it as a comprehensive plan. It has to be integrated. Why? Why? You don't have to if you want to just throw money away.
Yeah.
Or if you just want to not get press that's beneficial to your company, or even worse, if you want the marketplace to dictate. The market loves a vacuum, right? And so if you want the marketplace to dictate your brand and what you stand for, I personally don't. I would like a hand in shaping that. And that's really, I think, a publicity program that consistently delivers beneficial coverage, or manages amazing community events or trade shows is built. I mean, it is worth its weight in gold. It's not just for the big guys either. You can do this. There are, Nelson Schmidt, pretty good size agency. There's lots of smaller practitioners. You can definitely do this. And I just can't, I've been featured in Inc. and Forbes, in Scientific American. I've written for these publications, Time Magazine. I don't even remember all of them. And it's not by chance, okay? And it's not because I'm a genius either, but it's just because there is demand for great stories and great content, and nobody's better at it than professional PR folks. And so you might be the best at building transistors. Let someone tell your story. They're going to find something that you probably didn't see. So thank you so much for being with us today, and we'll have to do this again. I always think the show it ends too fast. I've even had people say it needs to be shorter, but it's just such a great topic. There's so much nuance to it, but I encourage everybody to reach out to Shelley. Bill and I are super easy to find as well, and we'd love to hear from you. So every Thursday, 11 o'clock Central, on too many platforms to list. B2B Marketing Mindset. We will see you all next week.
You've been listening to the B2B Marketing Mindset with Pete Monfre and Bill Lowell. Add to the conversation by commenting, sharing, and liking. And don't forget to subscribe and check out the links in the comments. Learn more at b2bmarketingmindset.com.